Audrey Henley here, and today we're going to be talking about queries. In this video, I wanted to go into some very practical, nitty-gritty query tricks. A query is essentially a business letter to a literary agent, trying to get them interested in your work, in you as a writer, and as a professional. But the ultimate goal at the end of the day is to get them interested in your story itself and get them to read the pages you've provided. Or I know some agents only ask for a query right away. So in that case, it's to get them interested enough in your story to request pages. So that puts even more stress on you as the writer to have a really interesting query. There's this whole cottage industry set up just trying to help writers write queries well. If you've ever gone to a literary conference, you'll see that there's at least 1 or 2 sessions on how to write a strong query. It is the most important 300-word document you'll probably write in your career as a writer. And the basic query formula is hook, book, hook. It goes like this. So your hook is your plot, and more specifically the parts of your plot that are going to interest an agent. The uniqueness, the characters, premise, essentially. And it's not a summary of your entire book. It doesn't give away your ending, because not giving away the ending helps make agents want to go ahead and dig into your pages to see what happens at the ending. And this part includes the comps. So comps are books that are similar to yours in the market, and agents have different feelings about whether or not you should include them. But I personally believe you should, because it's just a really good opportunity. So include comps to, one, show that you care about the market and you understand the market. This is why you want to choose comps that are, you can have one that's a bit older if it really fits your work and is specific. For example, my book is about post-apocalyptic, specifically a nuclear post-apocalyptic world, and the 100 happens to be a very good comp for that. Everyone's heard of it. I see it on a lot of agents' favorite shows lists, which is really cool. So it's something they're gonna have heard of. They're immediately going to get the genre of my book. But I also want to include one that's going to be published within the last 1 to 2 years. The reason you want to do this is to show that you are constantly reading within your genre. You know where your book is going to fit on the shelf. So you're going to have realistic expectations. You're not going to write a 150,000 word YA book and think it's going to sell easily. You've read enough books to understand the plot conventions, the genre conventions, the age category conventions. It shows a level of professionalism and skill. Big thing with comps though, and this is why a lot of agents I think are hesitant to say you need them. They get a lot of queries that say, this book is Harry Potter meets the Hunger Games. And that tells them precisely nothing. You need to pick titles that are specific and realistic. Here's the thing, you are a newer writer. This is going to be your debut book. The likelihood of you selling as many copies of your book as J.K. Rowling sold of Harry Potter, it's very unlikely. I'm sorry. As harsh as that may sound, it's sort of being a little bit humble and picking books that you think, this book in the market, doing reasonably well, I think my book could do that well. It is very similar to how I want my book to be promoted, how I see it going in the marketplace. I want to be published by a similar publisher, so that's why I include it. So there's comps for you guys, comps, and that'll hook agents, okay? So that's your hook. You're like, got you. So usually you want to put this first. Some people do put their book part first, so their metadata, which I'll talk about next. But usually, for most people, I recommend hook first. Okay, so we've got the hook and then the book. So the book part is your metadata paragraph, where you get into the nitty-gritty details of your book. This is where you're going to say, potentially if you have a non-standard point of view. So for example, my book has 4 points of view. If an agent didn't know that before going into your pages, they might be confused. Use this query to prepare the agent as much as possible. But then there's also standard stuff, so there's definitely include your word count. Don't leave that out. It's a red flag for agents, I think, because they're like, what is this, 200,000 pages? You're gonna include your genre, and you wanna include your age category. For me, my word count is 76,000 at the moment. My genre is sci-fi. Age category is young adult. Don't leave out age category. Potentially you could if you're an adult author, not sure. But I do know if you're querying for a younger audience, they're going to want to know, do you understand the difference between young adult and middle grade? If your character is 16 years old, that can't be a middle grade book, okay? That's going to be YA. And if you have a 21-year-old protagonist, that can't be young adult, that has to be adult. Don't talk to me about new adult, it's not really a thing right now. Unfortunately, I have feelings about it. They want to know that you understand the different age categories because they are marketed very differently, and there could be an imprint that's like specifically middle grade. And then the young adult imprint is a completely different imprint. I think like in the big five, there's multiple young adult imprints. So those are gonna be sold very differently to different editors. So going back to the hook part, if you're writing young adult for children at all, you wanna make sure you put the age of your protagonist in. Because if you have a 16-year-old protagonist and you clearly state, oh, this is young adult, that's going to look good for you because it shows you know how old your protagonist should be in your age category. The book part is simple, but it's very important that you understand the conventions of what you're querying and how it should look. But it's sort of stuff that's like bigger picture. So if you have a 200,000 word middle grade with a 20-year-old protagonist, I mean, nothing's going to save you at that point. But those are bigger structural issues. If you've already thought about the bigger structural issues, your book part should be pretty straightforward. And so then the cook part is about you, the author. So this is where you want to put any credentials. I know that's scary. I don't have credentials. I just want to write. Yeah. At the end of the day, the agent wants to see that you care about writing, that you've made an effort, I think, to find other people to read your work. So an agent never wants to be the first person to read your work. They want you to have found critique partners or beta readers. They don't care if your mom read it and thought it was great, okay? But they want to see that you have sought out opinions before coming to the agent, because an agent is not an editor. There are editorial agents who will do what they can to make your manuscript stronger, but they're not going to take a book that has never been looked at before and polish it up and send it to an editor. Like, that's never going to happen. They don't get paid for that. They only get paid when they get commission on your book ultimately selling. So if you come to them with a manuscript that has already gone through numerous revision rounds and it looks really ready, like, that's going to be one they want to jump on. It doesn't matter how exciting your premise is if you have comma splices everywhere or if you keep changing tenses. So in the cook part of your query, make it very clear that you have done your research. That's the kind of stuff you're going to include if you don't have any other credentials. Otherwise, like, say you're writing a book and it's about this girl trying to find the cure to the zombie virus. So if you have medical experience, like you're a nurse, I think that'd be something you want to include. So here also is where you want to put own voices. I mean, this can kind of fit in any of the paragraphs, but if you haven't included it in your hook or book part, you're going to want to include it in the cook. Why does it matter? And why is it that way? As I said before, query letters are ultimately business letters. You want to be succinct. To this end, your query should be 250 to 350 words. I think the 350 range is like if you have very complex world building or if you have multiple characters, but otherwise you want to keep it really short. And this formula, you know, just a business email. So why is there this complicated template for query letters? And I think the answer is just, it's what works. Agents don't get one or two of these a day. They get like hundreds a day, I think. Maybe like 50 a day is more realistic. They get a lot of these. And they get buried in these emails. Like, just... Okay, and agents aren't paid a lot. They work on commission. They work crazy hours. They read queries on the train. They read them at home. They read them on the weekends. They're crabby. They're tired. They are caffeine deprived when they are reading these. Follow this formula because at this point it's so ingrained and like so many writers have learned it that if you don't follow this formula, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage. So agents want to be able to skim your letter. So you have this letter and like, oh, here's what it's about. Okay, that's, you know, what I'm interested in. I represent young adult science fiction. Okay, keep reading. Book. Okay, they seem to know the appropriate word count and they seem to know what their genre is, so that's great. Cook. Oh, cool, this is own voices in some way, and cool, I'm trying to build a more diverse list. boop, boop, boop. Hopefully there's pages and they go that, read a few sentences, and they're like, oh, this is a good writer. And at that point, they'll decide whether or not they want to keep reading and take this seriously. They might, go back and read the query letter a little more thoroughly, catch a little more detail than they did before. But that is really the context of how query letters are read. So they're read by very busy, intelligent, tired, overworked people. People just like you who love books. Have that context in mind. So give them a little break, make it easy for them to skim through and avoid annoying the agent. Another thing I wanted to go through in this section of why does the formula matter? A lot of it is in the hook part that writers get confused. This is marketing copy. In no other stage of the process are you going to need to write marketing copy. Why do you have to write this? It's so weird that a writer has to create marketing copy this early in the game before they even have a literary representation. It's a little bit silly, and I wish it wasn't like this, but the reason it becomes marketing copy is because the more enticing your story gets, the more tempted the agent's going to be to go ahead and bite and request a full manuscript. Kind of wish it wasn't that way, to be honest. I wish you could just say, look, this is my basic plot summary. All the other information is standard, and then send it off. But it can't be that. It's gotta be most interesting little nuggets in your book. Another unfortunate thing is there isn't enough room to go into all the interesting details. For example, my current query, there's 4 point of view characters, and to me they're all the main character. But you can't write a query like that. I can't have a paragraph for each character. An agent would just throw that away. So I focused it on one character. I focused it on the character who has the first chapter. And if I had to pick a main character, it wouldn't even be him. It would be a different character who is the most dear to my heart, but I think as a reader you could pick any of them as the main character. And to me, my book is very much about a group dynamic. It's a ensemble cast type story, but I can't write my query like that because it gets confusing, and the agent, they want to be able to go from your query and then start your pages and understand what's happening. So queries exist because you're trying to hook an agent, and because of this, authors have to think about things they'd rather not think about, and I understand why it's hard and annoying. You can look at some of your favorite books that have good back cover copy that aren't just blurbs or a few quotes from the book, but are actual back cover copy. You can look at those and kind of condense them down to their parts and see if you can do that with your book. What makes someone want to keep reading is almost never the world building. Sorry friends, it's not your world building, so don't put too much of that in there. If you have a really compelling reason for this agent in particular to be looking at your manuscript, you might want to put that on the first sentence. It could just be one sentence before the rest of your query, honestly, or you can try to input book, hook instead. Just play around with it. But if they heart your pitch on Twitter from DB Pit or PitMag, something similar, in that case you might want to say that at the top. And I'm sure a lot of agents will tell you in their tweet regarding that contest, they'll be like, oh, if I heart your pitch, put this in the subject line or whatever, just in case. So for your hook, you want to connect sentences together with because of this instead of and then. So let me explain. A Simpsons episode, for example, a lot of the times Homer does something weird and sometimes it has consequences, but a lot of the times something random happens. It's and then a flying pig falls from the sky, and it's an and then. But if you're watching a drama, let's say Avatar: The Last Airbender. So we've got Aang keeps warning Sokka, don't cut down the trees. This forest has spirits and you'll anger the spirits, and Sokka ignores him. Because of this, they end up getting attacked by Green Vine Man, and so that's scary. What I'm saying is, you want your query to be an episode of Avatar, not an episode of The Simpsons. A novel isn't a sketch. It's a very long form, so you'll notice that a lot of shows that have the because of this connections between scenes, they're dramas, they're usually longer, and they're not just something you can watch while eating dinner. So the more serious shows will have this, and I think novels almost always have a because of this connection. And you don't literally have to start sentences with that. This next sentence, it happened because as a consequence of the thing that came before it. Your hook part of your query needs to connect together causally instead of being random And I think that's for two reasons. One is that it shows that you've clearly done some plotting. And that could, I don't care if you're a plotter or a pantser, but there's an arc. Narrative arcs happen causally, like because this happened, now I have to take this measure and then keep training. There's a structure to it, and writers naturally have sort of an arc in their story, whether they're plotters or pantsers, because we're so used to that in stories and it just comes naturally. Don't include details that bring up questions for the agent. Strange little tip. Your query is very short and you don't have enough time to explain your entire plot, especially don't have time for all your world building. An agent is not going to read your query and suddenly understand your magic system, and they're not going to understand characters' interactions together. What they're going to understand is the most important part of your world building, like we're in an elemental magic system. Got it. That's all they need to know. Like they have to know the character and like one important person to the character, and that's it. That doesn't take much time. It's like 4 sentences. You can probably get that across, and that's exactly what you need. If you add like a random detail, such as side character loses their magic after being shunned by the church, and then rest of sentence that somehow ties together with the rest of the plot. That little aside brings up a lot of questions that an agent is like, huh? So like suddenly there's a church and they can somehow excommunicate people and get rid of their magic at the same time. That's interesting, but I don't understand. You haven't given me enough information. How does that tie into the larger plot? You just don't have time to answer all those questions. So only want to include details that you have time to explain fully. You want that hook part to be able to be read and not really leave questions. Like you want to leave that big stakes questions at the end. You don't want to leave agents confused and have them asking like clarifying questions about the nature of your story. Another tip I have is to listen to podcasts in which agents critique queries. I'll leave a link to a blog post I've created. In that blog post, I have a list of all my favorite writing podcasts and YouTube channels. They're all really great, by the way. Listen to all of them. But I have like a specific section that's like where they critique queries. So check those out. My favorite right now is probably Print Run. And if you become a Patreon member of their channel for like $8 a month, you get access to all of their critiques. They do a query critique episode once a month. I think they've been around for a couple of years, so that's like 24 episodes. That's pretty good. They'll also do first pages critiques on that show. There are free resources where you can listen to agents critique queries. I think this is invaluable. They'll say a lot of things that are helpful to know, like their pet peeves. Like I know I've learned from podcasts like this that a lot of agents hate starting queries with rhetorical questions or just questions in general. How would you feel if ghosts started haunting your home? Not a great hook, and it also doesn't tell much about the story, like maybe there's ghosts involved, but there's a sentence that in that same amount of space could do a better job of introducing your story to that agent. So give that a try. Last tip, save the cat. Writes a novel. There's this page in it. In my print version, it's page 266, the log line. This has been extremely helpful. After I read this, I decided to just try writing a log line as they suggest, and I did, but I realized like I had more information I could fit in, and it was like longer than the sentence they suggest. So I went ahead and just expanded it and made it my query, and that query was a lot stronger. So and I'll link the Save the Cat logline template. Definitely buy this book and read it in its entirety. On the verge of a stasis equal death moment, a flawed hero breaks into two, but when the midpoint happens, they must learn the theme stated before the all is lost. So those are a lot of terms that you'll get in this book, but you can kind of get an idea from that. So like particularly the end, they must learn the theme stated before the all is lost. That's like specifically sticks. It's just a really good formula for queries. The shortened version as they suggest for your logline, but then also go ahead and expand it out into your query and it's gonna be great. Recap, we have the hook. That's the interesting parts of your plot, your premise, and your characters. Introduce all that. Your book, which is the metadata. This is all the stats about your book, basically. And the cook, which is a little bit about you to kind of humanize you and show who you are. Sidebar, I've always thought that computers there should be like an app, like instead of the little can that's on like Mac computers where you like drag your stuff and I'm like, I want to throw this away. When you put the little file into the trash, it should start on fire because it's much more satisfying to watch something burn. So, developers, if you're watching this, it's